Thanks very much for joining us this morning, Sarah, on the TisTalk podcast.
You're very welcome. I'm delighted to be part of what you're doing. Thank you.
And I see that you've been up in the Lake District filming recently.
Yeah, this is my second feature documentary. I've been working on it for 4 years now, and it's really a film about hill farming as it potentially is at a radical point of change with environmental schemes for landowners and rewilding and landscape restoration projects are changing the traditional methods of hill farming and driving the hefted flocks of sheep off the common land, which is the largest area of common land in England, is in the Lake District National Park. So it's a film about commons and commoning and the ancient traditions of hill farming, both of sheep, cattle, and fell ponies in the Lake District.
We're very lucky that this week on Tuesday we have your first documentary feature film screening at the New Vic in Tisbury. So a very different film with a very different setting. So can you tell us how that film came about?
So the first film I made, I wasn't a documentary filmmaker at all. I was a visual artist, and I'd been invited to a conference in Beirut in Lebanon where I'd never been before. And on the very last day, I went for a walk on my own and I sat in a cafe. And there was a young woman at the next door table who asked if she could talk to me. And we started a conversation, and that conversation lasted all afternoon. And we stayed in touch. And I was living in America then. And she had told me that she was a Palestinian refugee living in the refugee camp where she was born, and how all the rights accorded to other Lebanese people were not accorded to the Palestinians, who have never been given citizenship by Lebanon since they fled to Lebanon in 1948. So Fadia, her grandparents fled from their village in what is now northern Israel, and she is the third generation, and there are now 5 generations living in the camp, at least five or six even now, who are still waiting for something to happen to their situation. And there are 60,000 people living on 1 square kilometre in this refugee camp in Beirut. So anyway, I set off back to America and we stayed in touch. And I was invited by Fadia to come and stay in the refugee camp. And I said, well, what could I do? Is there anything useful I could do if I come? And she said, yes, make a film about our situation. And I said, well, I'm not really that sort of filmmaker. I'm an artist, and I make, installations and paintings and other things, but not documentary films, which is what you're asking of me, really. But anyway, I bought a much better camera than I already had, and I set off and I started filming straight away as soon as I got there. And I was so appalled by the conditions in the camp and this sense of a people who've been overlooked since 1948. Really, they've been abandoned. Their situation has not improved. The Palestinian refugees in Lebanon have had the worst situation of all the refugees living in the diaspora. So I took it upon myself to try and make a film about Fadia and her community. But as there are many films about refugee camps, very good films, I felt I needed to do something slightly different. So I applied for an artist's residency in Palestine, and I asked if I could live in the old city of Jerusalem. So I spent the best part of 2009 living in the heart of the old city of Jerusalem, because I really wanted to try and understand Fadia and her situation, her family, and the community in the camp from the context where her people had been displaced. So I taught art in Ramallah in the West Bank, and while I was there, I met a Palestinian ornithologist who told me that the area is on one of the 2 biggest bird migration routes in the world. And as I'd gone to the Imperial War Museum and other archives before going on my residency, I had all these aerial images the British had taken in World War I while all of that area was what is known as Greater Syria, before the European powers and Russia had drawn up the map that divided and separated people from one another and created all the countries that are now what is often referred to as the Middle East, and what I often refer to as the Eastern Mediterranean, but it depends where you're looking from, of course, these days. So I liked this aerial perspective because the photographs I had from British military surveillance, there was sort of air in the situation. And these images had been taken before the restrictions of lines drawn on a map. And somehow the idea that the birds flew without borders and that their routes connected Fadia in the camp with the village with which she identifies as home, where she's never been allowed to visit, which is now in a kibbutz in northern Israel, just 4 miles from the border with Lebanon. I felt maybe there was some poetic way of telling this story of a people who are separated from the place with which they identify. And it's a very polarized situation, and I didn't want to emphasize. I think film is an extraordinary platform to try and gather together and to find other ways of looking at a situation that may have reached a stalemate, but to try and find another perspective of looking and of understanding and empathizing. So it is a very personal story. It's about my friendship with Fadia and how I make journeys on her behalf to try and find her grandfather's house and the ancient mulberry tree that grew next to it that was sacred to the women of the village. And it was actually sacred to a saint who was known for her teaching powers, which is appropriate because Fadia is a wonderful teacher, and she is the head teacher of a kindergarten that she started over 35 years ago now in the refugee camp, and which she still is the head of, and from where she helps as many people as she can and gives children who really have nothing a hot meal once a day and education. And it's an extraordinary place and sort of community centre for the camp. And she has incredible sensitivity and humour and intelligence. And I feel very privileged that she calls me sister. And we've become very close friends over all these years, and we speak to each other regularly still. I'm very closely in touch with what's happening in the camp and with her and her family.
And the screening on Tuesday is followed by a Q&A with yourself. And I know that the screening is a fundraiser.
Yes, I'm very happy that I'll be in conversation with Anne Perkins, who's another local person who is a well-known writer and former Guardian journalist over many years and political editor. We will be talking about the film and hopefully about the situation in Palestine today. And the money for the tickets is going to medical aid for Palestinians who support Palestinians both through basic medical aid, which, as all the hospitals have been bombed in Gaza, there's an excruciating need for help. But they also help with psychological aid and the trauma that generations of people have gone through in the last 2 years. They will assist and support people during what is hopefully an enduring ceasefire. And we're also hoping to provide snacks, which any costs for that will also be added to the pot for medical aid for Palestine.
Is there a website, if people weren't able to join us for the film on Tuesday, is there a website where people might donate instead?
Yes, there's an Eventbrite link, www.newvictisbury.com/events. On there, you will see Fadia's tree, and there will be a link to either buy a ticket or donate to medical aid for Palestinians. And that would be so much appreciated at this time, because even when there may be a ceasefire, but people are in dire need.
And apart from all of the subject matter which you described, the film itself has had some very good reviews. Can I ask, Sarah, do you have a particular connection to Tisbury or the surrounding area?
I was born on the other side of Wiltshire with a Salisbury postcode. Grew up in a very rural small village. I've always felt very connected to chalk downland. and also to our ancestors. As a child, I was an only child and I walked a lot, and I would find Neolithic flint implements and fossils millions of years old in the fields all around where we lived. And that sort of sense of a past that was traceable in the present, I think, has always informed my work. So I came back to this part near Tisbury about 8 years ago now, and yeah, I'm happily walking the chalk downs once again, and still sometimes finding a fossil or a Neolithic flint implement. I'm very happy to be. Tisbury is my nearest small place to go and get my food and meet friends, and so I feel very close to Tisbury and very proud to be bringing the film to show it in the high street.
We're very much looking forward to that, Sarah, on this Tuesday, the 4th of November at 7:30. Doors open 7 o'clock, and Q&A with Sarah follows on from the film. So very much looking forward to seeing you then. And thank you very much for joining us on TisTalk.
Thank you very much again. I'm a great fan of TisTalk, so I feel very privileged to be part of one of your programs, and I look forward to talking to as many people as possible on Tuesday.